I'm hustling, every day I'm hustling. Hustling, every day I'm hustling.
All right, YouTube, gonna shoot another video here. I shot a video a couple months ago of how to tune your amplifier by ear and set the gains properly, which actually gained a lot of popularity and brought a lot of other questions as far as, well, how do you set your subsonic? What about your bass boost and bass frequency? Should you even set those? LPF, phase, all that. So we're gonna talk about that in this video. Again, if you're a seasoned car audio enthusiast, this may seem like common knowledge, like you should already know, but there's a lot of new people that don't understand, what those things are. So that's why I'm making this video. I'm also gonna be going over not only how to set up your subwoofer amplifier, but also if you have one for your fronts and your mids as well. I got a 4-channel here that I have one on my workbench. I'm gonna show you all the settings there as far as your high pass, low pass, right? Setting up a bandpass, frequency range and all that. If you're just joining me for my channel for the first time, it's my current setup here. I got a Crescendo Encore 12K running my 2 Sundown ZV515s. And I got a battery bank here, which I actually got some lithium on the way. I'm gonna be replacing these AGM excess power batteries with lithium. I'm pretty excited about that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's get started with the subwoofer amplifier. Now, just as a disclaimer, depending on what model you have, what brand you have, it may be set up differently, okay? Not all of them are the same. Typically, you have the same adjustments, the same knobs, the same inputs and outputs, but it may be rearranged differently depending on your brand, okay? So just wanted to throw that out there. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so starting with your subwoofer outputs, okay? This is where you connect your speaker wires going from your amplifier out to your subwoofer. Most subwoofer amps are monoblock amplifiers. This one is a monoblock. Basically what that means is, even though you have 2 positives and 2 negatives, they run in parallel to each other. So basically what that means is, even if you hook up 2 separate subwoofers, let's say those 2 subwoofers are 4 ohm, and you hook them up to this amplifier, because it's a monoblock, it's gonna be a 2 ohm final load. Okay, hope that makes sense. Let's move on. All right, so next you have your remote. Basically what that is that's where you plug in your remote bass knob, you plug it in there, and then you run the other end up to the front of your car. This is not even the right one for this amplifier. I don't even have the original one for this amp anymore because I don't use them. I prefer the inline RCA ones that tap in to your RCA signal. Let me show you what that looks like. All right, so this is the one that I'm running in my car. As you can see, it's the RCA style. Taps right into your RCA cables. You got the inputs and outputs, and it routes right through here. I think it's pretty snazzy. I got this one from Limitless Lithium on their website. Got the voltmeter there. You can get any color you want, has LEDs in there, and you can adjust your bass just like that on the fly. And I just like it a lot better than just the standard traditional bass knobs that typically people mount, wherever they want. But, choice is yours. I don't use them. I prefer to just leave them in the box or sell them and then get something nice like this. All right, next you got your gain. Very, very important. I'm not even gonna talk about it because I just did, like I said, a month ago or so, a 20-minute video on how to properly set your gains because it's that important. So make sure to click on the link if you haven't seen that video and go ahead and watch it next. It's gonna definitely give you some insight on how to properly set it by ear nonetheless. So you don't have to waste money on a lot of equipment to do it properly. Been doing it for well over 20 years and have had great results. All right, so the next one I got here is your subsonic filter. On this one, it's adjustable from 10 to 70 hertz. That's usually around the range that it's adjustable to. Basically, all that does is it's a filter to help protect your subs so they don't play frequencies they're not supposed to play. Because what happens is, let's say you have a ported enclosure and it's tuned to 32 hertz, but you have your subsonic filter set to 20 hertz. Well, if you play a song that, down to 20 hertz, what's gonna happen is you're gonna overwork your subwoofers, right? They're gonna be moving in and out way more than they should, and you can bottom them out and blow them, and bad things can happen from there. So basically all this does is prevents your subwoofers from playing frequencies that, they're not built to play based off the enclosure that they're in or, their parameters. So you wanna make sure that you set that properly. My enclosure that I showed you earlier, it's tuned to 31 hertz. So I have my subsonic filter set right at 30. That way I know that if I play songs that have, lower frequency, say, 25 hertz, it's gonna start rolling off the gain and it's not going to damage my speakers, when it starts getting that low. There's a lot of debate up to that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people saying, oh, well, you can set it lower than that. You can set, you should set it higher. But this is just what I do. And I've never had any issues with, speakers bottoming out, and I've always been able to get pretty loud on my setup. So that's what a subsonic filter is. Any more questions, feel free to comment below. Here we got bass boost and bass frequency. These two you don't need, as this manufacturer Crescendo so stated, not needed. Okay, I don't know too many people that do use it. A lot of amateurs use it because they think that it just makes their bass louder, which in essence it does, but not across a broad spectrum. As you can see here, right, you set how much more bass do you want at a specific frequency. So anywhere from 0 dB up to 12 dB, and then what frequency, right, from 30 hertz to 90 hertz. So let's say you set it at 60 hertz, and then you turn your bass boost up to 6 dB halfway. All that's going to do is it's going to create a peak right at around 60 hertz. So anytime you play music, that 60 hertz bass beat is going to be super, super extenuated loud, and it's going to be unproportional. I don't like bass boost because it's that specific reason. It doesn't boost it over a general band. It just makes a specific frequency louder, right? And then it rolls off to the left and right after that. So yeah, again, up to you if you want to use it. I don't know a lot of people that do. All right, so next is your LPF, your low pass filter. Basically what that is allows your speakers to play the frequencies that you want it to play and not play the ones that you don't. On my amplifier, it's adjustable from 30 hertz up to 250 hertz. I have my LPF set at 80 hertz because I want my subwoofers to play frequencies 80 hertz and below, and I don't want them to play anything above that. And your speakers, depending on the size of your speakers, that's going to determine also where you have your low pass filter set at, because you want it to blend properly with your front stage. Okay. For example, if you're running 15s, I would set your low pass filter right around 80 hertz or so. If you're running 12s, you can probably get away with setting your LPF around 100 hertz. If you're running 10s, probably closer to 110, 120. And once you start getting to 8-inch and 6.5-inch, you can start playing higher frequencies because they will reproduce it, and it's going to blend better with your front stage. It's all about just having that perfect symphony of sub, mid, and highs, and that cutoff there. So let me explain it this way. If you have your LPF set, let's say you have your LPF set at 100. So your subwoofers are going to play 100 hertz and below. Okay, you should have some decent sized mid-bass speakers that can pick up where your subwoofers left off. Okay, so if your subwoofers are only going to play 100 hertz and below because that's where you have your LPF set at, then you need to make sure that you have your mid-bass speakers set up, right around that, so there's no gaps in the bandwidth spectrum. So that way, you got your whole frequency spectrum covered, so you can hear every note that your music was designed to hear. So hope that makes sense. All right, next is your phase shift. Okay, generally, if you're just installing this amp as is, you can pretty much leave it at 0 and you don't need to touch it. If your polarities are reversed, right, negative to positive, positive to negative, then you would be at 180-degree phase shift. Okay, so in that case, you would then switch your phase all the way to 180 so that way your polarity is correct. There are many reasons of why that would be, but just understand that's what it is. So if you have your polarities hooked up correctly and you're just running a single amp, then you're not really going to touch that. The only time you would touch that is if you're trying, you have multiple amplifiers and different stages, and they're out of phase. So basically what that means is, you have one set of speakers going up, down, up, down, up, down, and another one maybe delayed a half a second, up, down, up, down, up, down. So, they're kind of dancing instead of in rhythm. Then what you would do is you'd go to one of your amplifiers and you'd start adjusting the phase so that it's correctly. Now, the proper way to do that is with an oscilloscope. Again, most people don't have an oscilloscope, but that's the right way to do it, because you can actually see the sine wave and you can match them up together so the phase is in phase with each other. So again, generally speaking, if you're running just a single amp and you got your polarities all hooked up properly, you can just leave that sucker at 0 and you don't have to worry about it. So all right, next we got the strapping ability. So a lot of amps don't have that. A lot of them do, right? Maybe yours doesn't have this, but this one does. So basically what that allows you to do is it allows you to connect two amplifiers together to double your power. Now the amplifiers, they need to be the same. So you would need to have two of these. You cannot connect or strap two different amplifiers of different powers, different manufacturers. It just doesn't work, okay? Bad things are gonna happen. So how that works is this. You have one master and one slave. So let's say I had two of these. Let's say I had one right up here on top, and I choose this one to be my master. What I would do is I'd take a plug that's specifically designed for this amp, connect it from the master output and run it to the slave input of the other amp. And on the other amp, I would move the switch from master to slave. And now that one's the slave and this one's the master. So I would just worry about controlling the gain here, the filters here, and the other amp will receive the input from that. You don't have to worry about adjusting anything on the other one. And you have, in essence, doubled your power. The only thing you need to worry about is your final ohm load that your amplifiers are gonna see. Just for an example, most amplifiers are 1 ohm stable. When you strap amplifiers together, you need to make sure that you just double that. So if your amplifiers are 1 ohm stable and you strap them together, then you need to make sure that your final ohm load is 2. Okay, because what's going to happen is your amplifiers are going to basically divide that, and they're going to see 1 ohm each. So make sure, depending on how you wire your subwoofers, their voice coil configuration, that if you do strap your amplifiers together, just realize that you need to run it at a higher ohm load so you don't fry your amps. Okay, so hope that helps. All right, and actually last thing on here on this side, you got your input and your output. Obviously, your input is where you're gonna plug in your RCAs so your amplifier can receive a signal. The output basically is so you can daisy chain amplifiers or have another means of an output so you can use those to run RCA cables from here to another amplifier, and you don't have to run another set from the front. Basically, that's all it is. All right, and I figured since I'm over here, why not go ahead and just show the other side. So obviously this is your power side. You got positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. This has triple inputs, they call it. Some amps have dual inputs. And most amps, under a few thousand watts have single inputs. So you're just gonna have one power and one ground. And also all amps have your remote turn on. Well, I shouldn't say all, most have a remote turn on that you put in basically to a 12-volt switched ignition source, so that way when your radio turns on, when your car turns on, however you have it set up, so does your amplifier. You can also run it to a separate switch, which I have as well. I have it ran to a separate switch on my dash, so that way I can cut off my subwoofer amp whenever I want, and I don't have to turn off my entire system. So that's the amplifier for the sub side. Alrighty, so here is the power side. We got your ground, remote power turn on, and your 12 volt. And over here, since it's a 4-channel amp, guess what? 4 channels. This amp is bridgeable, and basically what that means is that I can turn it into a 2-channel amp by bridging it, and that's going to give me more power to 2 channels. All right, so here you go, the other side of the amp. You got your RCA inputs, channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, channel 4. And typically what people do is they use channel 1 and channel 2 for their front stage, and channel 3 and channel 4 for their rear stage. What I've also seen people do, and it's what I'm doing, is I use channel 1 and channel 2 for my tweeters, and channel 3 and channel 4 for my mid-range. And again, either way, just a quick example of what you can use those inputs for. And over here, typically what you have is you have it divided that way. You got your settings for channel 1 and channel 2, and then you got your settings for channel 3 and channel 4. That way, if you're running different speakers that require different crossover frequencies, you can divide it up between the 2 groups of channels. So over here, we're just going to talk about one set because they're exactly the same settings as far as what's available for channels 1 and 2 and channels 3 and 4. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first up, we got those gain settings. Again, gains are very, very important. So many people set them improperly. Like I said, I have a 20-minute video explaining how to set gains. Again, I'm gonna put the link so that way you can click on it and watch it after the video, because I don't even wanna get into it here. It really takes a lot of time to understand how to set it properly and how to blend it in with your system so that it's set properly and you don't damage your gear. So make sure to watch how to do that in that video. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Like I mentioned before, most amplifiers, 4-channel, are divided by channels 1 and 2 and channels 3 and 4. So let's assume for the purpose of this video that channels 1 and 2, you want to run your tweeters, And on channels 3 and 4, you want to run your mid-range speakers. So what that means is now on channel 1 and 2, since you're going to be running tweeters, you don't want your low pass on because you don't want to pass low frequencies to your tweeters. So make sure that's off. On the same token, you do want to make sure your high pass is on because you want to make sure only high frequencies pass to your tweeters. So make sure that's on. Okay, over here is where you make the adjustment of, okay, what do you want that crossover frequency to be? Now, don't get confused here by the X1 or X2. That's why there's two separate numbers here. So right now it's on X1 times 1. So basically, if I leave it on X1, I can cross over my tweeters at 20 hertz, 60 hertz, 200 hertz, or 800 hertz. That's way too low of frequencies for tweeters. Tweeters usually cross over a lot higher than that, around 2000 hertz or so. So I'm gonna switch that to 10x. Now that means we look at these other numbers. I can cross over my tweeters at either 200 hertz, at 600 hertz, at 2000 hertz, or at 8000 hertz. Like I said, the tweeters that I run, they like to be crossed over around 2000, which actually that's where it's currently set at about. So that's all I would do to set up my high pass for my tweeters. And then I would just adjust the gains properly of how I explained in that other video. Now let's move on to channel 3 and 4, assuming that you're gonna have some mid-bass speakers hooked up. All right, so channels 3 and 4. Again, let's assume that we're gonna be using mid-range speakers. So basically what that means is you're going to want a bandpass setup, which means you're gonna be using your low pass and your high pass filter. I know that can get kind of confusing, but let's go ahead and try to explain why that is. So with a mid-range speaker, right, those are going to blend your lower bass and it's going to blend your tweeters. So it kind of fills in that really important gap that you're very sensitive to actually hearing, right? Your mid-range. So we're going to set up the high pass and then we're going to set up your low pass. So let's go ahead and set up the high pass first. Okay, now considering that they're mid-bass speakers and they're smaller, right? They're not going to reproduce the low frequencies of your subwoofers. So let's go ahead and turn on your high pass. Okay, and we're going to select what frequencies. Now, let's assume that our subwoofers were crossed over, let's say at 100 hertz. Now, if you have some pretty big mid-bass speakers, you can probably cross them over at 100, but most people are running probably 6.5 inches, maybe 8s. So you can probably set it at 150 or 200 hertz. Okay, so basically what that means is any frequency above, let's say 200 hertz, is going to go to your mid-bass speakers, and anything underneath that won't. Okay, so let's say for this example, you're running some 6.5 inch door speakers. Okay, you're gonna run a high pass crossover at 200. Okay, which that's what we're doing. And now over here, we're gonna turn on your low pass and we're gonna limit the high frequencies. Now, we just got done setting your tweeters to 2000 hertz, right? So every frequency over 2000 hertz is gonna be played by your tweeters. Now, if you think about it logically, that means we don't need your mid-range speakers to play anything above 2000 hertz because your tweeters are doing that. Okay, so let's set the low pass so that only frequencies below 2000 hertz come through your mid-range speakers. So looking at the settings here, okay, on X1, we can only go to 800 hertz. So we got to switch it to X10. Okay, now we look at the other set of numbers. So as you can see, right here is 1.5K to 3.3K. So we would turn that knob probably right about up and down, and that would cross over at 2000 so that your mid-bass speakers will leave off where your tweeters are picking up, if that makes sense. So that's how you create a bandpass between a frequency range that you want your speakers to play a specific range. I don't know any better way to explain it. I hope that made sense. But again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. And I'll always do my best to answer as quickly as possible. There's a lot of different ways you can set these depending on your setups. Again, maybe you're running 4 mid-range speakers, so you're gonna have both of these set up as a bandpass, or maybe you're running 4 tweeters and you need 4 channels all dedicated to your tweeters. So in that case, you'll be running high pass on all 4 channels and your low pass will be off. So again, your setup's going to dictate that. And if you need help specifically setting up your system, I'm always more than happy to help with that through the comments. Okay, so that's really it. If anybody has any questions about anything covered in this video, again, just comment and I'll do my best to help. But I hope this help added value to the car audio community and people out there that are maybe new or not used to setting up their amps as far as what they need to do with all these buttons and switches and such, and you know, help you guys get loud.